Chapter 6. When Theo had heard enough, he decided to leave the family alone and run a quick mission. On his bike, he raced back to the courthouse, went to the office of the public defender on the third floor. The head PD was a lawyer named Don Montgomery, but everybody called him Monk. To the other lawyers, judges, policemen, and courthouse clerks, he was simply Monk. Theo had seen him in the courtroom on several occasions, and no one used his real name. It was yes, Monk, and no, Monk, and your turn, Monk. Of course, when juries were present and things were more formal, he became Mr. Montgomery, but that was rare. On one occasion, the Boone family had bumped into him and his wife in a restaurant, and both of Theo's parents addressed him as Monk. He had a difficult job, one of the few lawyers envied. His office represented men and women charged with serious crimes, but not enough money to hire lawyers. And since the Supreme Court had ruled that every defendant is entitled to a lawyer, Stratton County had created long before Theo was born, the Office of the Public Defender. Monk's operation was always swamped with too many clients and not enough staff to serve them. Every year, Monk asked the county for more money, and it seemed, at least to Theo, that he was never satisfied with the support he received. According to Wood Spoon, Theo's father, most PD offices in the country were run by thin budgets. Politicians gave them low priority because they didn't like to spend money on criminal defendants. Theo hesitated before going inside. He paused and sent a text to Mr. Mount. Found Woody. He's still in jail. Charges seem silly but still serious. Be back soon. A secretary sat behind an old desk and was covered with a stack of files. Metal cabinets lined the walls. She was typing and paused long enough to frown at him. And without a smile, she said, "Yes." "Hello, I'm Theodore Boone, and I'm looking for Mr. Montgomery." "Why aren't you in school?" I'm excused for a few hours. You see, my friends got arrested last night, and his case will be assigned to this office. It's a youth court matter, and I would like to see Mr. Montgomery. He's in a big trial in the main courtroom, Judge Gantry. Youth court matters are handled by Rodney Wall. Theo did not know that lawyer. "Okay, could I please see Mr. Wall?" "He hasn't come in yet." "When might he come in?" "I don't know. I'm not in charge of his schedule." "Look, son, I'm very busy. You can check back later." She turned to her keyboard and resumed typing. Theo backed away and left the office. He walked down the second floor and went to the office of Judge Henry Gantry, the senior circuit court judge and a pal of Theo's. When he was dreaming, which seemed for like several hours each day, Theo wanted to be a respected courtroom judge like Henry Gantry, a man of great fairness and wisdom. Judge Gantry's secretary was Mrs. Hardy, a sweet lady who was always happy to see him, unlike that woman upstairs in Monk's office. "Well, hello, Theo," Mrs. Hardy said as he interrupted her work. "To what do we owe this honor?" "I need to see the judge." "Of course. And shouldn't you be in school?" "Everyone seems to think so. I'm excused by the principal. You see, one of my friends got arrested last night, and I'm trying to help him." "How old is he?" "Only 13. I know it's a youth court matter, but I still need to see the judge." "Well, he's tied up right now. We're in the middle of a big trial, and he's meeting with the lawyers." "What kind of trial?" Miss Hardy glanced around as if someone else might be listening, as if the trial were a big secret. "It's a drug case. Some men found out of the county were caught manufacturing drugs." "Is Mr. Monk defending the guys?" "How'd you know?" "I just left his office. I don't suppose I could watch the trial, could I? I'm excused from school until noon." "That's up to you, Theo. The courtroom is open to the public, but if Judge Gantry sees you, he might not like it." "Good point. Thanks, Miss Hardy." Theo walked to the door, but stopped when he thought of something else. "Say, Miss Hardy, when does Judge Gantry set bail for new defendants, for guys who have just been arrested?" "Usually it's the first thing he does in the morning. It doesn't take long." "A guy got arrested last night for armed robbery. Name's Garth Tucker, 18 years old. Have you seen his paperwork? Without looking for a file, she said, sure, Judge Gantry set his bail at $50,000. $50,000? Yes, it's a serious crime. Of course it is, but bail wouldn't be that high for a juvenile, would it? Oh, I don't know, Theo. Bail's usually lower for juveniles, but that's another court. Yes, ma'am. Thanks. See you later. Get to school. Mr. Tucker had arrived at the jail at 8 a.m. After a sleepless night, his lawyer was not far behind. When the jailer received the confirmation that bail had been set, a bail bondsman was quickly called and hustled over from his shabby office across the street. The arrangement was typical. For a 10% fee, the bondsman produced a written guarantee that Garth would remain at the county and show up for court when required. Mr. Tucker wrote a check for $5,000 and left the jail with his son. They went to the city pound, paid for another fee of $250, and Garth drove his Mustang home. An hour later, after the shower and change of clothes, he was at school bragging about his big adventure. By then, Woody and Tony were back in their cell playing checkers, the only game available, and killing time. Daisy was at work, cutting hair at a salon. Theo was watching the clock and trying to keep out of sight. If one more adult mentioned school, he might explode. At 11:30, he swallowed hard and re-entered the PD's office, certain that a grouchy secretary would yell at him. She did not. She quietly informed him that attorney Rodney Wall had called and was investigating a case over in Macyville, a small town half an hour away. He wasn't sure when he would make it to the courthouse, if at all. The office had only 3 lawyers, Monk, Rodney Wall, and a guy named Udall, who was the assisting Monk in the drug trial. So there were no lawyers left behind in the office, and no one for Theo to plead with. Defeated, he said thanks to the secretary and rode back to school. During lunch, he met with Mr. Mount and Miss Gladwell and explained the situation. The charges against Woody and Tony would probably be reduced or dismissed, at least the armed robbery. But they would stay in jail until their lawyer could convince Judge Pendergrass to set the reasonable bail. It's pretty outrageous, Theo said. But it's not that unusual, Mr. Mount said. Our juvenile system is overloaded, and there are never enough lawyers and counselors. It's not unusual for kids to get chewed up by the system. Woody will be lucky if he doesn't spend time in a detention center, which are not good places. But he didn't do anything, Theo said. He's an accomplice to a crime, Mr. Mount said. He had once been a lawyer and gave up that profession to teach. Can you explain that? Miss Gladwell asked. It's the law everywhere, Mr. Mount said. Pretty basic stuff, really. 3 guys are together. One has a gun. He goes in, pulls the gun, grabs the loot or whatever, and all 3 make their getaway. The 2 who waited in the car will always be charged with being accomplices to the robbery and will face the same punishment. That's not right, Theo said. Well, not in this case, but Woody's in serious trouble. I doubt if he'll get off free in this one. It's pretty heavy stuff, Theo. With a water pistol? I'm assuming the guy who got robbed didn't know it was just a water pistol. I'll bet his story is that he thought it was a real gun. That's all that matters. What a stupid move. Do you know this guy, Garth Tucker? Miss Gladwell asked. I don't know him, but I've heard of him. He's one of Tony's friends, though Tony claims they didn't hang out that much. Woody told me Woody told me and his mother that he had never liked Garth. Said he had always thought the guy was trouble. Woody thinks Garth was probably drunker than they realized. He must not be very smart, Mr. Mount said. And Woody was drinking too? Miss Gladwell asked. He had a couple beers. Does he do this a lot? Theo didn't know how much beer Woody was drinking, and it didn't matter at the moment. He wasn't about to squeal on his buddy. I don't think so, he said. I've never seen him do it, but he and Tony were alone a good bit. Their stepfather, who was out of town, and their mother, who has 2 or 3 jobs. Things are not going well too. Things are not going too well around her house. That poor kid, she said, sitting in jail with no one to help him. And that's the end of chapter 6.